everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rumcast. I am John Gulla, and with me in the cockpit, as always, steering this flight of fancy together, is none other than my co-pilot, Will Hookinga. Will, I'm rather excited, as you can tell, for today's discussion topic. I've got my notes all prepped and ready. How are you doing this fine day, and have you completed your pre-flight checks yet?
Wow, really went all in with the flight metaphors. My uncle Pete is actually a pilot, so there is a flight connection in the Hookinga family.
Cheers to Uncle Pete.
Yeah. Served in the Air Force and now has flown for Delta for a long time. So I think the F-16 was the jet that he flew.
That's like the real thing deal there, like Maverick. He's like
it's not the
Top
exact.
Gun.
I don't think it's the exact jet they flew in Top Gun, but I think it's similar.
I think they were the F-14 in Top Gun.
I think you're right. Yeah. But he had the call sign and everything. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, his call sign was Hook, which is how our last name starts. So
that is awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So anyway, a little family history for me, but I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about rum flights. I literally didn't even make the connection until just now that's why you did that in the intro. So wow. I'm playing catch up here. Now it makes even more sense. Great intro idea.
There is an intention behind everything I do, Will. Just get used to it. It's
a method
there.
to the madness.
So
I'm really excited to talk about that. Before we get into it, I wanted to mention real quickly that I did something recently that I hadn't done in quite a while, which was, instead of just talking about rum, writing about rum.
Hey!
I had a chance to, I found out about this distillery in New Orleans called Porch Jam Distillery, which rum fans are likely not familiar with because until this thing that I wrote about, they had never done rum. And in fact, they were doing vodka primarily was what they were known for. Doing it on a pretty large scale for a craft distillery. Like, they have a big facility and everything. But a couple years ago, they got really interested in doing a fresh cane juice rum down there in Louisiana, since they have the proximity to sugarcane. And I was just kind of fascinated by, you don't often see a distillery that is, primarily doing vodka pivot to fresh cane juice rum. And when I say pivot, like, this is a big deal for them going forward. Like, what kind of got me interested was when I saw that they were doing this on a scale that you don't see very much from craft distilleries. Like, this is not a one-off.
They're not dabbling. Yeah.
Yes, they're not dabbling. And in fact, when I talked to the head distiller down there, Jason Zeno, he was like, "Yeah, I see us as a rum distillery now."
Wow.
And what's interesting about this is the harvest season in Louisiana is about 15 weeks. So that's really the only time that they have access to fresh cane juice. And as I mentioned, they're in New Orleans, which, compared to other parts of the country, is close to sugarcane. But as we know, when making fresh cane juice rum, the clock is ticking. As soon as you crush the cane and get the juice out, you have to get it to the distillery quickly. The mill that they are buying the juice from is just a little under 2 hours away, I believe. And so what they're doing is they have this truck with a 6,000-gallon ISO tank on the back, and they drive it 2 hours to the mill. This is, again, only during the harvest season.
Right.
So they pull right up. The mill, as they're grinding the cane, puts a hose into the tank. Juice goes right in, usually about 5,500 gallons. They get straight back to the distillery, ferment it, and distill it, and they just keep doing this the whole harvest season. They were basically working in like alternating 12-hour shifts. Like, the stills were running 24 hours a day. So when I started seeing this, that's what got me really interested. And then I got even more interested when I saw the varieties of rum they're making. So they're doing kind of a standard unaged rum. It's rested, I believe, in stainless steel for around 3 months maybe.
Okay.
This is like, they're calling it their Blanc, so it's kind of their flagship rum. Then they make a separate rum distilled a little differently. The fermentation is all the same, but they distill it a little differently for the rum that they're going to age. And I get into like the production process in the article a little bit, but basically the only difference is this part of the still called a deflegmator. And it's really fascinating. Wow. The first person who ever told me about a deflegmator and explained it to me was Maggie Campbell. And it's a really interesting kind of method. And when you compare the two rums back to back, and this one little distillation device is like the only difference, it's pretty eye-opening. And then the third one which I think will get rum fans excited, is a Queen Share that they're also doing. So this was the first time I had tasted a Queen Share cane juice rum, and it actually ended up being my favorite of the bunch personally. So
it sounds amazing. I was gonna say a deflegmator. Sounds like a made up word.
It does sound like a made up word. It's basically a condenser, and so it allows you to kind of like get some additional reflux, or not use additional reflux.
Okay.
And so basically the rum that they're making just for aging, which they call new make, it's done with no deflegmator. I wanted to say deflegmation. I don't know if that's a word though.
Sounds
so,
good.
like the laziest way to describe the difference would just be that like it's funkier than the other one. So it's got a little bit more punch, a little more pungentness, which makes sense because it's going into the barrel, right? So you want something that's going to stand up to the wood. But anyway, there's a lot more. I don't want to talk about this much longer, but I think it's a really interesting project. So I did
Where do we see the article?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
It's on my American Rum Report website, and it's just one of those projects. Like I'm excited for more rum fans to find out about it because I think what they're doing is pretty unique and cool.
Nice.
But enough about me. What's going on with you?
Well, it's been an eventful few weeks, I guess, and thankful for it. So I had a wonderful time last weekend, actually, at a local rum event. The Florida Rum Society, we had an event we dubbed the Miami Takeover down here.
Yeah.
And it was pretty fantastic. We were very lucky to have 50 amazing rum fans and rum connoisseurs join us on Miami Beach. It was like a torrid 48 hours of experiencing rum. We went to some of Miami's best bars, including Esadico and Swizzle, which many people probably know. We did some rum trivia from yours truly.
Oh, right. You told me you were doing that. How did that go? I loved it when you mentioned it.
It was fantastic. I think people really enjoyed it. It's always hard to know going in something like that and kind of taking a little bit of a risk. But the whole idea was like, look, we're doing all these tastings and you have to break it up a little bit. Let's do some other things that we think are also going to be fun. And honestly, I thought everybody in the room really enjoyed it. And I tried to set it up to have some questions that were harder than others, so they were more challenging.
I was going to say, like, how do you it's a tricky balance between you don't want everything to be super, super easy, but you don't, like, what you don't want is the questions to be so hard that it's just like crickets.
Exactly. That was my fear, was like, nobody's going to do this. So I explained in the get-go, it was like Jeopardy style, basically. And so you had categories, I had 5 different categories, and then had 10 through 50 in terms of like how hard to easy they were, Did
people have to answer in the form of a question?
No, I didn't make it that difficult. There was 1 or 2 that were that way, but nice. No, it was more about, again, just having fun with great people and talking about rum, which is something we all love, which is it's fun. We gave a little prizes here and there too, so there was some incentive. And I guess this ties into also, we had rum producers there that were doing tastings. So they also had some things that they were able to share. Dan Dehart from Grander was there. He showed us some of his latest. Plantation brought in some of their new bottlings. Andrew Cabot from Privateer debuted their newest lineup of the Distillers Drawer series for this year. Cool. Yeah, and I finally got to try all of the available offerings of the Clarins from La Maison Valley.
There you go.
And that was pretty nice. Especially, I don't know if you've had a chance, Will, to try them all, but I had not.
I think there's at least a few of the newer ones that I haven't gotten to yet. I haven't had the Communal, which I believe is the blend of the Clarins, if I'm remembering correctly. Yep. I'd love to get to that one. And I haven't had many of the aged ones either. I don't know if those were included, but I'm definitely behind on those.
So we didn't include those in the initial piece, but we did get to experience some later, some of us. I think the biggest thing was the Sanson, which is fairly new in the market, I think, the Clarence Sanson.
I haven't had the Sanson yet.
Yep, that was there. And then I hadn't personally tried somehow the Le Rocher. That was the one I hadn't tried. But so that was obviously nice to try them. But I think what was even more valuable was being able to try them all in a flight all together and then compare and contrast and really suss out like what I love about them, which one my current favorites were. So,
the magic of the flight.
Right. And that kind of, I think, spurred on our idea to what we wanted to talk about today as well, which was rum flights and how they make sense and what we think about putting forward in terms of philosophy for them and their value, I guess.
Yeah. People say comparison is the thief of joy, which I believe is true in our personal lives. But when it comes to rum, I think comparison is actually a beautiful and educational experience.
I fully agree. And I think that there's no better way than I can think of, even for the very well-experienced rum connoisseurs, to put together rums and do those compare and contrast, whether blind or not. I mean, I think there's value to doing some blind ones, obviously, too. Mm-hmm. But even in a flight where you know what's being presented and you get to directly experience those in conjunction, it really, I think there's some magic there.
Absolutely. So I guess we should take a quick little break before we get to our own flight discussion, before we take off with our flight discussion.
Thank you for adding to the metaphor. And yes, let's do that, and we'll be right back with our own. Hey, Rumcasters. You might have noticed that we're coming up on a milestone for the Rumcast soon. Our 50th episode is fast approaching, and we wanted to remark the occasion by doing something fun and cooperative. If you're a loyal listener and you have found that this podcast has helped you to explore the world of rum, taught you a thing or two about it, like it has for us, or maybe you just enjoy listening to people talk about rum on your commute while you dream about your drink of choice for the upcoming weekend, we want to hear from you. Send us an audio message letting us know who you are, where you're at, and a short message of whatever it is that you want to say for our 50th episode. This could be you telling us what you love most about rum, your personal favorite rum or favorite person we've spoken with so far, who we should speak with next, and what subjects to cover, or just sending me and Will a shout out or a toast. Audio clips should be less than 30 seconds in length and sent before Saturday, March 12th, 2022 to make sure we can include it. Send the clip in either a WAV, MP3, or AIFF format, or just record a voice note on your phone and send it via email at host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com, and we will confirm when we have it. Now back to the show.
All right, so we are back, and we are ready to talk rum flights. I think to give you an idea of how we structured this exercise, we kind of started by saying, well, what is the ideal structure of a rum flight? And we landed on,
is there an ideal?
Or is there? Yeah. I think what we landed on was generally the amount of rums is going to be somewhere in the 3 to 5, maybe 6 range. Right. Depending on what you were doing. But we were also talking about it from the standpoint of, generally, I like a flight to have some sort of theme to it, a category, so to speak, something that organizes the rums and like makes them make sense to be presented together. And so what we decided to do was come up with 3 different categories, and those categories are Caribbean rums for newer rum drinkers, so kind of like beginner people,
introductory.
One is a Caribbean rums for more advanced drinkers, so people kind of like taking the next step in their rum journey. And then a non-Caribbean category, so a category to showcase all the interesting things, or a selection of the interesting things happening outside of the Caribbean, because one thing that we love about rum is that it's truly a global spirit, so wanting to kind of showcase other stuff. And then, so John, this was your idea, and I really liked it, which was, instead of just doing the same amount of rums for each flight category, let's do a 3 rum, a 4 rum, and a 5 rum flight. But we got to pick at our own discretion which of those flights we applied each amount to. So those were the parameters that we gave one another going into this, and we didn't discuss anything beyond that. We just kind of went our separate ways, made our separate lists, and I think I expected it to be a little easier than it turned out to be. Yeah. And I ran into just interesting little conundrums in trying to do this, and discovering like one interesting thing was, it made me wish that certain brands or certain distilleries like had a rum available that was maybe at a different price point or more accessible and that kind of thing, because we'll get into kind of like what our sort of guiding principles were as we did this. But I wanted to pick things that were at least like, I wanted to be able to, if I wanted to, go out and create each of these rum flights myself. So
Right.
It needed to be stuff that was available, not super, super limited, not super expensive.
I also kind of went the same route, but I did. My conception of the exercise was less about the specific rum choice and more about the philosophy of behind what hangs together in the ways that you were saying there. So even where I agree, what I tried to do is stick to bottlings that I knew were available or provide options of what I'm talking about where it was a little harder to find.
Well, I think we're in agreement that starting with the sort of beginner level Caribbean rums is the best place to start. So shall I kick us off? Do you want to kick us off? How do we want to do this?
I believe you should. I think you should go, and I'm curious to see if this is the 3-flight, 4-flight, or 5-flight that you chose for this, and then we'll go.
I'm just going to reveal it from the start.
All right.
This is my 5-flight, my 5-rum flight.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I went with this one. And so I'll just start at the beginning. I'm revealing these in the order in which I would put them in the flight.
Right.
And my first pick for this, if I could get a drum roll, I don't know if we have a way to do that.
We can do that.
Okay, yeah, let's get a little drum roll. It is Captain Morgan Spiced Rum. And no, I'm not joking. So here,
oh my God.
Here,
I feel better about my list already. Okay.
Here is my rationale. I want to reacquaint people with what they probably think rum is, so that as we progress through the flight, they can see how different rum actually is from a 35% ABV spirit with flavors and sugar added to it. Because one thing I wanted to try to do with this is dispel people's concept of what rum is. And so I wanted to take one of those brands that is among the leaders in sales of stuff that people associate with rum. When I tell people who aren't familiar with rum that I like rum, this is one of the first bottles that they think of or ask me about. And so a lot of times people have unpleasant memories of this, but I want it in there so I can see, like, this is where your mental framework of rum is right now. And then I'm about to destroy it with the rest of this flight. Okay. Does that make sense? What do you think of this strategy? Because it's kind of, I don't want to go as far as calling it a bold move, but it's a move that could backfire. But I was too intrigued by doing this. I wanted to kind of shake things up, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think there are certainly positives and negatives, or pros and cons to doing it that way. I love the idea of how you've set it up. But here's the thing I would say is, if you're going to do this flight, you need to be able to be there with the person to explain what's going on, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're not just dropping this off on a table.
Flight.
Right. Okay,
I am
just,
the pilot.
Just to make that
I'm the
clear.
pilot of this flight. They're the passenger.
There you go. And they're about to take a journey. Gotcha.
Exactly.
All right. So I have more comments, but I'll save them for mine and Echo.
Might be a little turbulence as we take off on this flight, but
so rocky takeoff there.
Yeah. So progressing from there, I wanted to go to. I think it was important to include this style of rum because there are a lot of brands within it. And it's important to the history of rum, where rum is. So this one is Don Q single barrel. Okay. So I wanted to do something, a light-bodied, kind of that Spanish heritage style rum, where you're kind of showcasing blending and of rums of light, heavy body, things like that. Because even though the single barrel is single barrel, it's still a blend of like different distillates, you know?
Right.
And so, and I just kind of gravitated to Don Q. I've mentioned before that I think those single barrel releases are underrated. And I also want them to do more stuff like that, because I think that they have a plethora of really interesting, cool stuff there that they just haven't released the way that rum geeks want them to. Yeah. And so I'm trying to encourage it, spur it on a little bit. But so I wanted something in that style. And I also, a general principle along the way in this was that when possible, I really wanted to avoid rums with additives. Right. And so that's a rum that does not have additives. And
other than the Captain Morgan, right?
Other than that. That one was by design, but I think Don Q is a good brand to showcase that style of rum, and it's the kind of thing it's a logical early step in the rum flight again, because it's lighter bodied, very easy drinking, lower ABV, and if they like that, it opens them up to a whole big category of rum with lots of different countries of stuff they might be interested in. Whether that's Panama or
right, Central American,
Colombia. Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff in there. So that's what I wanted to go to next.
Okay.
I knew going into this flight that I was going to have to include Jamaica, Barbados, and Guyana.
Okay.
Those were my 3 unbreakable rules. The flight had to include those 3 countries. And so for these, going next, I wanted to go to Barbados with Dourly's 12, which I think we've talked about on the podcast, but I still think is the best value rum in Barbados rum right now.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good introduction to the category, and again, just super affordable. For Jamaica, I'm going with Appleton 8. So I'm eschewing the probably more popular Appleton 12 and going with 8. I just think it gives a little bit more of that Jamaica fruitiness while still having a decent amount of age on there. You get those nice oak characteristics and stuff. So I know some people strongly prefer the 12 to the 8, but this is my flight, and I'm taking a risk. I wanted a little bit more of that Jamaica fruitiness that I think is present in the 8 and gets a little bit, not buried in the 12, but just the wood is just more dominant in the 12. And then I'm going to close things out. This was the hardest choice, finding the right Guyana rum for this flight while wanting to stick to my no additives rule.
Right.
Because the thing is, DDL is the one distillery in Guyana. They make El Dorado. It's such an important distillery to the past, present, and future of rum that I felt like it had to be present here. But again, it's hard to find the right rum that's constantly available, that isn't super limited, that isn't super expensive, that showcases what that distillery can do, that doesn't have additives. However, the more I have read and having tasted it, I feel like there's still some question marks about the new El Dorado 15. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's kind of, they made some changes to the lineup, and you can tell the difference because the new El Dorado bottles, they don't have that kind of like red border along the label.
Right.
So the new El Dorado 15, there's kind of conflicting reports out there about this, but it either has far less sweetening done to it or none. And it's certainly detectable when you taste it that to me, it does not taste like an overly sweet rum. So while I can't confirm 100% what all is in that rum, I think it's at least close enough to where I would feel really good about recommending it to someone new. Just like the distillery is so important. Like, it needs to be in there. And I know I do like what Ed Hamilton is doing with all those new single casks that he did. Yeah. But I didn't want to go that high ABV, and I also haven't had a chance to sample that many of those yet. He also, Hamilton 86, I really like. I just think for someone's first introduction, it's not my favorite choice for that. Yeah. So that's how I kind of compromised with El Dorado 15.
So let me ask you this: your 3, 4, and 5, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana. You had them in that order. Was that intentional, or could those be interchangeable, or what was the thought there?
I feel like I could make an argument to putting those in almost any order.
Okay.
Where I went with it, I wanted to start with Dourly's 12 just because Appleton 8 has that, like, it's funny because I don't think you or myself would describe Appleton 8 as funky. No. But I think to someone who's never had Jamaican rum, sometimes people will be like, oh, like that's what funk is.
What is that? Yes.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to make that the next one. And El Dorado 15, partially because it's the oldest, I put it last, but I could see easily moving that, switching that with Appleton. I kind of didn't want to have it next to Dourly's because I feel like Appleton is distinctly different. It's like maybe less similar to Dourly's, even though I wouldn't say El Dorado 15 is similar to Dourly's. I don't know. That's the order I fell on, but I could be talked into mixing them up.
Okay. And so there was really the idea there was you started with the lighter bodied column style and then advanced into the medium and more heavy bodied stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even know
essentially
if I call it
those are all
body,
pot and column blends that come after Don Q. So yeah, gotcha. and they're Dourly's 12 and Appleton 8. The similar ABVs. It might be the same ABV. I have to check, and same with Eldorado 15. So that's why I just kind of felt like none of these are rums that are like super blow your palate out,
Right.
So
right.
yeah, I saved the oldest for last, and that's how it ended up.
That makes sense to me, and I also, from an introductory point of view, that I totally get your rationale there, and I think mine is similar.
Hit me with yours.
Yeah, I'll start by saying mine did not include Guyana.
Okay. Explain yourself.
Well, here's the quick explanation. I ran out of room in my flight, and as I go through these, maybe it'll be kind of clear where that happened or occurred. But I totally agree with your point about the importance of the distillery, and can see how in any real Caribbean introductory flight it is an essential piece. That said, I think you can do one without it. So
yeah, well, and I had an extremely tough cut from this flight as well, and so I want to circle back to that once you've said yours, because what I ended up cutting you might have in yours. So
okay, yeah, this was a difficult exercise trying to bring people through, like you said, from an introductory perspective into something of this wide world of rum, even within just the Caribbean, is a challenge.
It is.
So all right, I'll start you off. So I did 5 for this as well.
Yes.
Probably for the same rationale you did, which is, like we said, there's just so much to choose from, and it was so hard to make cuts.
Yep.
So I ended up with 5 on this one also. My first one, we had similar thoughts. You went nuclear on me with the Captain Morgan. I didn't quite go that far, but I could expect getting some shit for this to start with. So before the digital pitchforks come out, my pick to start off this flight was Bacardi Ocho or Bacardi Diez.
So I almost, instead of doing Captain Morgan, did a Bacardi rum, because again, I wanted to pick something that was just synonymous with rum to most people.
That's exactly my thought as well. I think you and I thought exactly the same there with where are we starting in a comfortable place for people. And by comfortable, I don't mean necessarily even anything to do with the liquid in this case. I mean, what is your conception of a rum?
Right.
And this fits the bill, not only the name recognition, but also an aged rum, roughly, 8 or 10 years aged. And then just the style as well is, I think, people who are uninitiated, that's what they think of a rum, especially a neat or a sipping rum or something along those lines, a premium rum. That's what they think of. Mm-hmm. So that's where my brain went. Now, I also did think of Don Q7 here as well, because that is my jam. Mm-hmm. I like Don Q7 a lot. But, I just feel like the familiar name of Bacardi helps people kind of ease into the conversation a bit more, maybe.
I think like the reason I don't know. I kind of just wanted to start off with something like that I felt strongly negative about. and so when I was thinking of doing Bacardi, I was thinking of just doing like the basic Carta Blanca like their basic like dark rum. Yeah. But then I was like, I don't know, but if I'm going to follow it up with Don Q, I feel like I should do a Bacardi like mid-range kind of rum as more the direct comparison. And honestly, I've had those rums. I'm just not a big fan of them, which I'm also not a big fan of Captain Morgan. But just so that's kind of why I ended up going away from that.
I guess that's where we differ slightly. Is you were saying you want to put something strongly negative in your flight in order to lead them into the comparison, and that makes sense to me. But I also have a hard time putting anything in my flight that I don't like. And for me, Bacardi Ocho or Diez, yes, they're not going to knock anyone's socks off, and I'm not saying that this is a rum that I go to even very often, but I don't believe they are bad rums. I think they're well done. I mean, for what they are and what they bring. So maybe we disagree slightly there. If somebody were to serve this to me at a bar where there was very limited options, I don't mind it.
I think Bacardi Ocho in a cocktail, I think, has a place. I'm not totally clear on the additive status, particularly
I agree.
with the 10-year. There's some murky waters there. So
sure.
That was another thing where if I'm going to put a rum in here with additives, I want it to be clear that there are additives in this rum. So
that's fair. That's fair. Go. All right. So my number 2, now we're going to get somewhere that's, I think, very likely to be new for many people and hopefully bring some interest there. Okay. So I'm going with Admiral Rodney's from St. Lucia.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They have such great offerings, and this was one of my personal light bulb moment rums, just for recognizing how expansive and amazing the rum world as a whole actually is, and how diverse. I love the Admiral Rodney's line because I think they're still 40% ABV. So for this, that works really well. By the way, the Bacardis are also 40%, but they bring plenty of robust flavor with it. It's middle of the road also in terms of aging. I mean, it depends on which one you go with in the line, but they bring that a bit of spice and the vanilla wood notes that you tend to expect from that and get with them, and from other popular spirit categories. One of the things I hadn't mentioned was that I thought about this in two different ways as an introductory set. The first was somebody who is uninitiated to any kind of spirits. And the second was the people who are more familiar with other spirit categories, but not so much with rum.
Like a bourbon person or something like that.
Yeah, we don't say that word here, but yes. So that was the thought here, is this works well for both of those, I believe. I personally think I would go with the Royal Oak, but any of the three standard lineup for them would work well. Oh, and not to forget the Superior bottle, Will. Oh man, I love showing people that bottle. It's such a fantastic looking bottle. It has an opulence to it. I think people like it. So,
I do think people like it. I think the top is cool.
That big
like
chunky
wooden knob
stopper
kind of top. I'm not a huge fan of the bottle itself. There's too much just empty glass on it.
We're all allowed to be wrong, Will. So
I do like that pick though. I think that's a good one for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's pretty appealing. It's definitely, I think, like the most fitting beginner level St. Lucia distillery offering.
And it brings a uniqueness, right? That St. Lucia rum does have a uniqueness to it, which is what I was going for. Yeah. All right, moving into number 3, we're syncing up a little bit here. Okay. I have Jamaica, and I had the Appleton 12 or the 8. I had either of them there, really.
Okay, so you're sitting right on the fence right there.
I am, in this case. I like them both. I have the 12 I tend to use more than the 8, but that's because I think I have the old 8, and you had mentioned the new 8.
Well, so the old quote-unquote 8 wasn't called Appleton 8. It was...
Signature or whatever it was.
No, Signature has always been the entry level of that like set. It was like a Reserve, I think. Reserve was what it was called.
Okay, I know 12 was Rare Blend, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the 8 it's a lot better than the Reserve personally to me. And let me be clear, I like the 12 too. I just think the 8 to me is right up there with it, and it's cheaper and it brings different elements to the table. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think, like you said, I fully agree that people that are new to this rum category are going to think, ooh, funk. Whereas we may not see that as a hugely funky rum. I think it's there for them. So that's why I have it here in this third position. You also take a slight bump in ABV here to 43.
Yep.
So that gives you a little bit of a jump up. Yep. Monty Musk Classic might work well here too, but that's 40 ABV. But I also believe that would be on the side of, gosh, I don't want to use the word tame because that is giving the wrong sense to it.
Right.
But a less, or more well-rounded maybe.
It's all relative.
Jamaican. Yeah. All right. So now moving on to number 4 for something completely different.
Okay.
We are headed to Martinique for our first agricole.
Yes.
So I struggled with this one and whether or not to include this in an introductory kind of flight, but I really settled on, I think I want to have this there.
Yeah.
My pick for this one is finding one of the more approachable agricoles, and I had settled on either a Nissan or perhaps a St. James via OP or XO.
Okay, so you're going aged here.
I am going to aged, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for I consider the unaged as well.
This is a big debate I had raging inside my head for the last 48 hours. So continue with your rationale.
Right. So I think I thought about the unaged, and I love that you get the more grassy notes from the unaged, maybe, and that it starts to calm with the age influence on it. But I think that, again, in an introductory flight, I'm looking for something that's a little less, again, I'm having trouble with the word. A little less obtrusive. Nope, that's not the right word.
Pungent?
A little less pungent.
I don't mean that in a pejorative sense.
No, but it's hard to find the word that I'm looking for there.
I would like a Blanc agricole is just, it's a little punchier.
Right.
It's got the vegetal grassiness is, it's just more present than it is in an aged one.
I agree fully. Yes. And then there's even some that I have tried aged that are still punchier than others, just depending on the amount of aging, depending on a lot of things and factors. So yeah, I think the St. James I had recently tried for the first time and really found them to be exceptional. Very, very good products. Not going to break the bank. Not too difficult to find. I think Nissan is a little harder to find here, but you can. I think, Total Wine in my area has some, and then there's some other places that stock them. So the Reserve Especial is a little expensive, but it really is great, and I really enjoy that one as an agricole. That was the first agricole that I really said, I get it.
Mm-hmm. That was the eye-opener.
Before that, I was kind of like, nope, this is not for me.
Yeah.
So that's why I went with those. Stays in the 42 to 43% range of ABV as well, and I wouldn't go higher than 46 here for this flight. So that's where I kind of was with this one. And then rounding it off, number 5. So we finished with my heavy hitter and personal favorite, Barbados, but I'm going with Mount Gay XO here.
Okay.
Just, so hard to beat the flavor and classic Barbados rum experience that you get with Mount Gay XO. I went back to this recently, actually, after purchasing the Andean Oak bottle of Mount Gay, that recent release. Very fortunate to find that in my area, and thank you to Jay for getting that to me from Orlando. Yes, I really enjoyed that one as well, but I went back to the Mount Gay XO to do a quick compare and contrast, and I found that, gosh, it's such a great product. It's a fantastic Barbados rum that is really difficult to beat for a 40, I think it's 43% as well, that really just brings everything you want out of it.
Mount Gay is a Barbados institution as well. Yeah. So I feel like it's right at home in there. And let me ask, when you went back to the XO, was it the previous blend or the newer blend?
I believe this was the previous blend is the one I have.
Both good. I've done the side by side comparison, and I think they're both. The old was good. The new was really good.
I bought that bottle like 3 years ago.
Yeah, it would be the old then.
I'm fairly certain it is the old blend. I really, really enjoy it. It's a lovely rum, and I can't imagine a better way to cap off this flight.
Yeah, well, props to you on your flight. I mean, I think that's a really solid lineup. You didn't name anything that I am a complete, not a fan of, except maybe the Bacardi picks.
Yeah.
But, I put Captain Morgan in mine, so living in a glass house over here. But so can I tell you what my toughest cut was? And then maybe you can share yours, because my toughest cut was Martinique. I went back and forth on should there be an agricole in here, and where I was seeing it kind of philosophically was, if I'm introducing someone to agricole for the first time, I just want it to be a Blanc agricole. I want it to be unaged. I want them to get that full, in your face cane juice agricole. Like this is what it is, and that's not to say like aged agricole isn't like the real agricole or whatever. I've really, in the last year or so, I've had more and more aged agricoles, and I've really started to find ones that I think are mind blowing, which I mentioned on previous episodes. But when it came down to including an unaged agricole in this category,
it's just hard to do.
I was just concerned if it's a beginner for the first time in the context of all this other stuff. I just think it's going to be really tough for them to appreciate it. And so that's why I left it off, and I feel really bad about not having an agricole rum in here. But I also,
if you had 6, right, you would do that. I'm sure of it.
If I had 6, I would include some type of agricole. But I also just think, in my experience, people tend to, especially people who aren't already seasoned spirits drinkers, they tend, like, agricole needs to grow on them a lot. Now, if it's someone who's coming from like mezcal or tequila or something like that, then you can hand them an unaged cane juice rum, whether it's agricole or not, and they might be like, oh, I love this. This is right up my alley. But and
that's an important point, Will, that we have to take into account the context of who we're pouring this flight for.
For sure.
If this isn't, we're not looking at doing this like restaurants, like what's on a menu. We're talking about, we're hosting, as you said, you get to be the pilot. So getting that information about the person you're doing the flight for is incredibly important to what you want to decide to put in. At least that's how I see it. Yeah.
All right. Well, what was your toughest cut, by the way? Did you have any toughest cuts?
I did. I actually had Trinidad that I was trying to fit in there and see how I could do it, and I couldn't do it in a way that I felt like was right for many reasons.
You were trying to fit in Trinidad before Guyana?
I was.
Come on, John.
I'm glad you put in Guyana. I had the same problem you did, which was that my experience with most Guyana rums is it's difficult to find one that has no additives to it. And
it is.
So that was the whole reason I just really kind of almost wrote it off, which, look, that says a lot about things and the state of things, right? Doesn't it? So hopefully we continue to get more Guyana rums that are not adulterated out there. I think that's an opportunity to continue for. Yeah.
100%. Okay, so do we want to move on to our
Let's do it.
Advanced Caribbean rum flight? Do you want to go first this time?
I can go first for this one. All right, so advanced for me, I was thinking about, you mentioned kind of like an intermediate or next level or next step.
Yeah, advanced might not even be the right word. I think like, intermediate or next step rums, I think is a good way of describing it.
Got it. I had more of a thought of like not just next step, but like somebody who would be similar to me. If I was sitting down and wanted a flight to get poured for me that I would love to experience, what would it look like?
Gotcha.
And so mine is a little less of an maybe intermediate and a little bit more advanced. Gosh, now that sounds like I'm calling myself advanced, which I didn't mean to do. But just somebody who is well initiated. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Your understanding of the rum landscape, about different things, and you're not a rookie at this anymore. And we'll leave it there. So what I started with here, interesting. I went balls to the wall here. We're going to start with Haitian Clairin.
All right, which one?
So my favorite personally is Sajus.
Okay.
But I really, really liked the Le Rocher that I got to try recently. Barbecue flavored potato chip came to mind in there with that Le Rocher. And I was just like, wow, that's so good. But the Sajus, if I had one, I'm going Team Sajus.
I feel like Rocher is kind of like the most polarizing Clairin. Like I know people who love Clairin and don't like it. And I know people who absolutely love it.
My goal here with these was, I think you may have tried a Clairin before, but you may not have tried the one that I'm going to choose for you.
Might not have tried this one, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that was an awesome idea. So again, going back to the context, if they're like, oh yeah, I've had one, I've had the Vival, then I know I can give them a different one. They're fantastic. If you haven't tried a Clairin, they are unfamiliar in different ways, but so delicious and really, really just something that I think for me in the rum category is a highlight. It's a pinnacle of one of the places, and where we get this style of rum is just so fantastic. I don't want to miss out on it. And I think for a flight like this, where we're talking about those initiated people, you can include this and they will appreciate it even at the higher ABV.
Yep.
It's going to punch you in the face, but in the best possible way.
Well, and it's not like the ABVs are super, super high.
No, it's not ridiculous.
I think Sajou is like right around 50, maybe a
56. I thought it was 56. 56? I thought it was 56. Somebody, will fact check me on that, but I could have sworn it was 56. Anyway, why don't you look that up? I'll go to my number 2 on this flight. So my number 2 is going to be the least surprising, which is going back to Barbados, but this time I'm sticking with Foursquare. Again, with the idea that, yes, if this was something I wanted, I would be looking at either anything from the ECS series, particularly those that maybe I hadn't experienced yet, but even many of them that I have, I really just struggle to find one I don't like. And appreciate for all those reasons. Or maybe, hey, if you happen to have one of those Velier releases hanging around, that's an amazing, I haven't had a chance to experience any of those at this point, but I keep hearing from other people and seeing reviews that those are also incredible. And boy, if I saw that, on somebody's bar or something, I'd be like, yes, put that in my flight.
I'm having to bite my tongue about my own flight right now, but I'm just, I cannot fault you at all for including a Foursquare ECS pick in there.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, going to Jamaica. And now we're going to go to either. And I have either here, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit.
There's a lot of cheating on this going on from you.
Yeah. Sorry. Oops. Worthy Park, one of the single barrel picks that came out recently. It doesn't matter which, but of course I'm partial to one of them from the Gemini. The Hamden Great House or Bird series works equally well here.
Which Great House?
I would prefer the first one.
The first one or the 2021?
The first one that was released.
Well, there was one before 2020, and then there's 2020, and now there's the newest one.
So I'm talking about the very first one that had the red label.
Okay, gotcha.
I've only tried it once, and I think I prefer that to the green label, which was the following year. Still love the green label and think it's fantastic. I get a different few notes and profile from it. Haven't tried the orange label, the new one.
So I liked the green label. I prefer the orange.
Okay. Yeah, so I got to try that orange label and see. But honestly, any one of those.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the point that maybe these are a little bit harder to find, but if you have one of them, if you have one of the Bird series, if you have one of the Worthy Park single barrel picks, or even just the 12-year or the single estate are just fantastic, that's what I want to put into this slot. Jamaica's going to represent, and it's going to come with the boom.
Yeah. I mean, that's one that comes with the boom for sure. So
yeah.
So what are you closing it out with?
All right,
is this your 3 or your 4? Did you say?
Oh, I didn't even say. You're right. I totally forgot. This is my number 4. I'm doing 4 on this.
Okay, so we did the exact same thing.
I think we have good reason. It made sense as to why I chose these in this order. And
I mean, there's just too much good stuff in the Caribbean. I needed to use as many picks as possible there.
Yeah, yep. And we can maybe explore more in the future if this is something that is enjoyable. I enjoyed this so far. My number 4 pick for this flight is Trinidad.
Okay.
So this is where my Trinidad landed from the earlier one, and I went with Caroni.
Really?
If you can find it.
Okay.
So I also think, again, to my cheating here of doing this, if you don't happen to have a Caroni around, also there is some from TDL that are like 17-year-old, the TCRL pick, I think, and others that are really, really great as well, Trinidad rums. So I'm going to say the Caroni, I've talked about this before. Not my favorite. The tire fire, phenolic kind of Caroni, especially that 2000 bottle, I think is the one I'm thinking of. I did not like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that over time, I've had the opportunity to try a couple different Caronis. I actually got to try one at the Miami Takeover Florida Rum Society event this weekend. And that one I enjoyed.
You're warming up to it. See, this is what I was mentioning a few episodes back. Yeah. You have to find the Caroni for you. So that's what it comes down to sometimes.
There was a very gracious person who shared a drop of their the Caroni bottle that they had, and I very, very much enjoyed it. So I think this is a rum that has history to it. Again, if I saw a flight that had a Haitian Clarin, a Foursquare ECS or Velier release, Worthy Park or Hampton, those bottlings that we talked about, and a Caroni on it, I mean, how can I pass that up?
Yeah, I mean, who would? That's a Mr. Moneybags flight right there. A Mr. or Mrs. Moneybags flight. One of these days I'm going to box you in and I'm going to give you actual constraints on this stuff. Force you to make these tough decisions. But until that day, I won't give you too hard
endless
of a time
pockets.
Because this is tough. Yeah. That's a great flight. I can't quibble with anything there. So other than, it's interesting because you had the Barbados overlap. Well, you had Barbados and Jamaica overlap with your picks. I only had one. I'm double checking. I only had one overlap with mine.
Okay.
My overlap was with Jamaica, but and I'll get into what some of my toughest cuts were with this, but I'll go through these quickly. I'll give them to you all at once. This flight, I'm starting with Nissan Blanc. Okay. Then I'm going to Clarin Sajou. So we have one rum in common.
Excellent.
That is also my favorite Clarin that I've had. And by the way, I looked it up, and I think it may vary from batch to batch, but I believe like the standard Clarin Sajou is around 53%. Okay. I think that ABV you were looking at was one of the aged ones, but I could be wrong. Again, I think it can
I'm going to pull my bottle up and see.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And then from there, a Chairman's Reserve Master Selection pick. Give me any of the stills. I think for this, I'd probably go with something that's either Vendome or John Doerr rather than the column still, which the column still is great. I'm just thinking, for a little bit of that like almost like metallic-y funk that I love from St. Lucia Distillers.
That's a fantastic one.
I want to get that in there.
Yeah.
And then closing it out with Hampton Overproof. So again,
shocker for you.
Rather than going with one of the limited bottlings or yearly bottlings, I wanted to go with one of the flagship, always available bottlings. Sure. So Hampton Overproof, love that rum. It's great. It's under $100, so great value, great stuff. And I think the hardest thing for me in this was I wanted to get Mount Gay in here somewhere because I think it's such an important distillery.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to put it in the beginner one because I think Dourly's 12 is such a good value, and it's
totally understand.
It's so much cheaper than any of the Mount Gay offerings that I would feel good about, having as like a standard neat pour, like Eclipse is a good rum, but it's not something that like, I don't know. I wouldn't want that to be someone's first introduction to neat Barbados rum.
Or Black Barrel. Yeah.
Well, Black Barrel now is over $50.
Is it?
Yeah,
wow.
it's not. So I wish Mount Gay had something in that kind of range. That Dourly's 12 kind of Dourly's XO kind of spot, but it's not there. So I felt bad. Also another toughest cut, not having a Jamaican white overproof in here. I really wanted to get a Ray and Nephew or Rome Fire, one of those two in there. Those are my two favorite Jamaican white overproofs.
That's like a rite of passage for any rum fan, right? At some point you get there. Yeah. But again, putting that in with a Haitian Clarin flight, woo.
That's going to punch you in the face. So those are kind of my toughest cuts, I think. The first one, it was cutting an agricole out. This one, it was not having Mount Gay or a Jamaican white overproof. I felt a little bad about those, but got to make the tough decisions sometimes.
Yeah, and we didn't do these in a vacuum, right? Or at least I didn't. When I put my 3 lists together, I did them kind of all in a similar time frame. And so, ironically, I guess, funny enough, since I had a Martinique rum in my first list, I didn't include it in the second one and felt okay about that. Mm-hmm. But again, assuming this was one flight I would be giving, like you said, the cuts would be very difficult to make. Yeah. And how do you do that? It's very tough. Part of it is, again, who are you giving it to? What have they had before? Where are they coming from in their rum journey? And then part of it is, what do I have available as well? So
exactly. And that's kind of why I wanted to pick stuff that like I knew I could get if I needed to get it. So all right. So should we move on to non-Caribbean?
Yes.
I'm excited about this one because I feel like we might have the most variants.
I think so.
I could also see us having some picks in common, but
I don't think so. I think, I'm going to guess 1 out of 3 we pick similar.
Okay. I'll guess that as well.
Okay.
So my picks are, I'm starting with Fiji.
Son of a bitch. There's 1 out of 3.
I thought this might be the one.
I agree. That was the one I thought of.
This is the one where I'm offering multiple suggestions. My go-to suggestion with this is always the Homesky Rumcast Fiji single origin blend. I still think I was just texting you last night. I was at Chopper in Nashville, which is a great bar, and I saw that rum on the bar, and I was like, can I get a daiquiri with that? Because it's just fantastic, and it's just as good on its own. But I did, that was a rum we were involved with, so I don't want people to just think we're always shilling this rum. So the TCRL Fiji rums, there's some variants in what all's out there, but I think most of those are really great introductions to Fiji. They're available. They're at a good price point, so that would be my other recommendation for Fiji. Beyond that, I'm going Privateer Navy Yard.
Okay, I like this pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Privateer, especially Navy Yard, having that new American oak, it's such a distinctive rum style that you don't find a lot of other places. And I feel like it doesn't need that much explanation. It's distinctive, it's good, and I think it's a great representation for good American rum. And then last but not least, this was really tough because I was thinking like, do I want to go Reunion? Do I want to go Mauritius? Do I want to go MOBA in South Africa? Do I want to go Australia? Everyone knows, I'm a big fan of the Australian rum. I've talked enough about that TCRL Ben Lee release and how much I like it. I didn't want to just talk about it again. So instead, I ended up not going those directions, mostly for availability and price point reasons.
Right.
And instead, I'm going to go somewhere very close to the Caribbean, but technically is not what I would consider part of it. I'm going to go
guess.
with Paranubes here. Because obviously Mexico has a Caribbean coast, right?
Yeah.
But Oaxaca is not on that. And in fact, its only coast is on the Pacific Ocean. So I think I'm correct in saying Oaxaca is not, a Caribbean region. So I kind of wanted to get...
I think you are, yeah.
I wanted to get another cane juice rum in there, and I just loved learning more about Paranubes. I've loved learning more about Mexican rum and how much, tradition and history is established there with it. And so yeah, I threw it in there, and I feel great about having it in my little 3 rum lineup here. But I think those are 3 completely different styles that really kind of showcase how like shape-shifting rum can be as you go across the globe. So I think that would be a fun flight.
Did you give any thought to the order of how you put these? That was something I struggled with mine.
I'm doing it in that order. Yeah. I'm going to start with the Fiji, because I think those the Paranubes, the APVs might be similar. Paranubes might be a little lower than some of the Fijis. It depends on which one you go with. But, Privateer Navy Yard, over 50% ABV. Yeah. But Paranubes is like the just going to take your palate out back and beat the crap out of it, so that's why I ended with that one.
So I think it's interesting how you approached it and how you went there with it. So I will also say we kind of had 2 crossovers with this. Yes.
What are they?
But I'm going to pivot in real time here, because I think I can do that and still achieve what I wanted to. Yeah. But I had Paranubes on there.
Really?
Yes.
I did not expect that.
I did. I had Paranubes on there, and I also had Fiji as one of mine. But let me jump into mine here and then see if we can talk about these together, how they are. So the number one I went with, the way I approached this was I first went to regions or even continents and then narrowed it down a little bit. So I first went to Central America, and Central America was a place that I knew I wanted to explore some more, whether that be Belize or Mexico. And I ended up in Mexico, as I was saying, with Paranubes, but equally as good is Uruapan. I can't even pronounce it. Uruapan Agricole that I've mentioned on this podcast recently. That is phenomenal, fantastic, and I think it's a little
Agricola, I believe, right?
Thank you, Agricola. That is a fantastic rum that I really think more people ought to try to get to experience if they haven't. And I don't think I could start with that, because I don't think that's going to bomb your palate like Paranubes would.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go there. I'm going to start with that in Mexico with the Uruapan, specifically that Agricola. Okay, number 2, I was going to the South Pacific.
Yeah. So I knew we were both going to pick a Fiji rum, but I just feel like when you're talking about beyond the Caribbean, it's tough to not include Fiji these days.
It is tough because it is such a fantastic rum. I will say just really quickly, I'm gonna pivot over to Australia instead, because I had these kind of both there in that area and region. But before I do, the Homesky Fiji, I agree. We don't want to talk it up too much, but I will say this: somebody mentioned that they hadn't looked at the Homesky Fiji because it was so light in color. That they thought $50 seemed, roughly that price point seemed like a little bit more for something that was so light in color. That was the only thing they were basing it on, was the color.
Well, I mean, and I hate to say I'm not surprised, but I think that's a challenge. I mean, there's a reason that people associate age and darker colors with expense in a lot of spirit categories.
Right. We know this, and I get that to an extent. But listen, I mean, if this is available to you and you've tossed it off because the color is not dark enough, please do yourself a favor and go find this, because it is that good. All right, that's all I'm saying about that. So let's pivot to Australia for my number 2. And yes, Binley is where I'm thinking. I'm thinking more specifically, though, Inner Circle. Okay. I got to try some Inner Circle Navy Strength.
I haven't had any of the Inner Circle rums. So.
Yes. So funny enough, you mentioned a Navy Strength rum. I'm going to mention a Navy Strength rum here. Inner Circle Navy Strength is the one I got to try, and I loved it. Thought it was a fantastic rum. So happy to have had the chance to try it. At pretty much every Binley I've tried so far, I liked, but I have to say this Inner Circle was really, really great. And gosh, I wish we could get more of it over in our neck of the woods here in U.S. Just Binley in general, I think, is bringing the heat. I think they are doing really, really great things. Australia in general, I think, is doing some really great things in rum too. And as we talked about with our recent episode, that I think highlighting that and saying, hey, here's a region that is doing really great rum. And if you haven't had a chance to explore that enough yet, here's part of a lineup of a flight that I think it works really well in.
Yeah. I've made my feelings known on those rums. So
yeah. And let's close it out here. Closing out number 3 slot. You mentioned it, Will, and I think rightly so. We are going to South Africa, and give me that MOBA.
Yeah.
Give me that MOBA.
The question is which one, though?
I have it right here. I will tell you. I have yet to try a MOBA that I didn't like, with the exception of the Bushfire, I think.
I think it's Bush.
Bushfire, not my favorite thing. It was a little bit too much smoky there. There's people that love that. I like peated rums. That one wasn't for me, though. Not that's peated. I didn't mean to complain.
I was about to have some questions there.
No. But I'm just saying that you get that smokiness. That's a similarity. Anyway, other than the Bushfire, you can't go wrong with MOBA, whatever release in MOBA, whatever bottle you get. But I'm going to tell you, I just had the chance to finally get my bottle of Homesky MOBA. Oh my God. Oh, I need to send you this immediately. It is fantastic.
I've had it. It's good.
You've had that one. Okay.
Yeah, I've had it. I don't have a bottle, but I've tried it multiple times. It's a mind bender.
It's so great. It is, for me, one of the best things I've tried so far this year, for sure. I know that we're early into the year, but it is sticking out as one of my favorites thus far. Friggin' fantastic. I still get this, and maybe people will say, what? I don't understand, but I get this mix of agricole-like elements and typical molasses-based elements too. So I there's almost like what I feel is a perfect marriage in a way of those two kind of elements that are coming in. I don't know where the flavors are coming from and how that's actually coming together for me, but in my palate, I get this kind of blend of those two worlds in MOBA. And it's not the first time I've had it, but I've had it again in this MOBA bottling from Homesky that I just think is fantastic in every way. I love it. I am so glad to have a bottle of that now. So, yeah.
I'll also say I've been hearing some very good things about the MOBA releases from Bira, which is a Canadian independent bottler.
Yes.
I know someone who just acquired 2 bottles of Bira, and I'm looking forward to tasting those sometime soon.
Is that Bira with an exclamation mark?
Bira.
Bira.
Yeah. Bira.
Bira.
That's how it is.
I've seen it.
And then, you have the MOBA bottlings themselves, which unfortunately I don't believe we can get here in the US. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but maybe someday. So MOBA crossed my mind. Again, I was trying to show a little wallet restraint, John. I don't know. I think if people want to recreate our flights, they can go withdraw thousands of dollars from their bank account for yours, or they can just
hey, I tried to give enough flexibility to make sure people could use most of what they had. If you got to buy one bottle, go for it. Make it happen.
This was definitely a fun exercise. Actually, I want to create some of these flights and just try going through them now.
I was going to ask you that if you had actually poured them or it was just conceptual.
It's just conceptual.
Same here.
I'd need to pick up a few things to be able to do all of these. A lot of it is stuff I have on hand, but there's some holes right now that I would need to fill.
Yeah.
So, but and I think there's no limit to the amount of categories we could do. But if you're listening and you had thoughts, if you were sitting there screaming at some of our rums that were left off the list that you think absolutely should have been in place of other ones, definitely let us know. Hit us up on social media, leave a comment on the post for this episode, send us a message, send us an email, host at rumcast.com. That's HOST at rumcast.com. Let us know what your ideal rum flight is, or let us know other categories that would be fun to do. We're all ears.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking is, hey, are there other categories of flights that we should cover? Whether it's one I thought of was unaged, just specifically unaged rums. There's plenty of other categories I think we could do. So yeah, let us know if you like what we were doing here and you found this engaging. Give us some ideas for maybe a part 2 at some point, and we could keep following up on this and having fun with that discussion. So as always, we appreciate you listening. Thanks so much. We are looking forward to some of the great interviews we have coming. So stick around and you'll see who we've got joining us in the near future. We're excited about it. Episode 50 coming soon.
Episode 50.
Hashtag episode 50 coming soon. So thank you all for joining us on this journey, and we will see you back next time.
Thanks, everyone.